Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Story number 1. Tank, written by Hope Data Adam. Artillery, both friendly and enemy bombardment, and blasted the landscape to hell in between our two defensive trenches and defense lines. We sat in our trench with our weapons closed, waiting for the bombardment to pass and for us to charge the enemy lines. The humans had proved difficult to fight, and news from across our fronts came back to our army in a sorry, grim state. The humans employed devastating yet effective weapons of war, hellfire guns as we call them, and flamethrowers. I sat in my designated sector of the trench with my platoon. We all sat on each side of the trench, facing one another, either laying in wait or doing minor activity such as eating or checking and rechecking their weapons. Dirt and mud kicked up from the fall into the trenches. Some of the humans' artillery's shells hit near our position and shook the ground, causing us to all duck and cover ourselves. As much as the humans shell us, we actually have never seen their artillery pieces or vehicles. Even our 4 observers that are tasked to look for such struggle to find them and always come back empty-handed. It's either they deploy stealth technology on their artillery or they're just really good at hiding them. I don't know, and I still don't know. The bombardment ceased to stop, and even the superior officer had not given me any new orders except to lay down and wait. I started to grow a small itch in the right of my shoulder, which is a very strange and rare occurrence as our skin doesn't get irritated as humans do. I couldn't figure out what the itching sensation means. Doesn't mean that I needed more water. Maybe an awkwardness with my platoon was causing it, but I can confidently say now that I was nervous. Very, very nervous. But as the commanding officer of my platoon, I must not show any doubts. My men look up to me as a beacon of inspiration, a man of status achieved through hard work and devotion to my career. When I first met them, I saw a sparkle in their eyes, the aspiration to once become like me one day, and lead as well as inspire a group of men into glory and pride. If I cower, they will lose faith not just in me, but in their own abilities as well as because of the commanding officer is weary and weak. They too will think that they are weak. May our forefathers bless their souls. The bombardment stopped and the sounds of shells exploding ceased. I peeked out of the trenches to see towards the enemy, but the ground was still filled with smoke, dark and grey ash. Using energy weapons may not be the best idea for artillery. The smoke it kicks up irritated me. Since my eyes aren't adequate, I close them and I use my ears instead and listen for anything unusual and out of the ordinary. That's when I heard the familiar sounds of human flyers slowly coming closer. A moment later, a human rocket struck and exploded the ground a few meters in front of me, lunging me back, and I hit the wall of the trench hard. The human flyers screeched past above the trenches after bombing it. I thought, they're still trying to bomb us into submission. My scout tasked to keep an eye on no man's land, whatever happens, returned to me panicked yet confused at the same time. He stuttered and struggled to spit out what he wants to report out to me. That's when we all felt the ground rumble and the planet shook. Yells and barks of orders stretched out across the trench of our army. Everyone panicked and running all over the place, like headless chickens, what the humans would call us then. Loud booms ensued, and explosions returned all around us. Then the sound of the human machine gun fire filled the battleground, but it was all slowly came closer and closer. I didn't understand what was happening, was wounded, and relied on my men to report to me what the hell was happening. They told me large metal boxes on tracks were rapidly approaching our position. Mounted on them artillery cannons and human machine guns. I looked up above into the sky and witnessed one of our bunkers getting struck directly by a projectile. Before pieces of the structure exploded out in a blast. Initial confusion began, but our panic spreads. I ordered my men to stand up and fire back at the enemy, grabbed my weapon, and attempted to stand up despite my injuries. Once I stood up on both my legs to take a peek over the trench, my heart stopped for a split second as I reacted and quickly ducked for cover. The sound of loud whirring engines, while the squeals of tracks filled my ears as the metal hunk drove effortlessly up and above and over the trench. I forgot what happened next. It was all a blur, almost like a passing memory. I woke up in the muddy dirt, my hands cuffed together and my arms behind my back. I looked around to at least gather some context on what's going on, and that's when I get to see it. The tank, an armored power vehicle with offensive weaponry mounted on it. It was an ugly beast, but effective. I soon found out that yes, that is the tank, the same word and the same thing we spoke about in our briefing. It wasn't some container. It wasn't a water tank or a fuel tank. It was a war machine. The tank, heavy-duty, apex predator, head of the pack. End of story. Story number 2. The Terran Gogit, written by SlowAD2584. The infiltrator was in a panic. The humans had discovered it somehow, in the very midst of their town's rural community. It fled to the only place that it could reasonably hide, the vastness of the local IKEA store. It was going to be okay. It was going to be okay. Its technology would overcome these primitives' futile attempts to find it. They only got a good look at it just the once. Its cloak field was holding, and its active counter dampening fields rendering it absolutely silent. It was a silent blur, a scale of fields and blur breaking up as sudden movements into unspecific drifts. The infiltrator's mission was blown, obviously. It was sent to identify vulnerabilities in human physiology and technology, so that these humans would be better known as they entered the galactic hegemony. This was supposed to be a simple, sneak in, observe, take readings, test observed weaknesses to determine actual limits, for more accurate data. It was testing a limitation of the human household security when it was discovered. Most humans in the dead of night had paltry defenses from peering inside to view them. It could literally see into their homes through all of the windows. It was gathering substantial data and was moving to another house when, before it even got close to the property, a horrible baying was heard, howling and barking off the walls so loud it echoed from the neighboring houses. Other howls and yells sounded off in the surrounding households, and the lights began to turn on all around it. How had it gone so bad so quickly? Humans began slamming open the doors to their houses, and several often quite large animals rushed out, sniffing at the air and bounding for the fences in the infiltrator's direction, or straining on their leashes, tugging directly towards it. Flashlights began to play across its cloaking field, and human voices of alarm began to be raised. Apparently, the cloak field itself was detectable under directly lit and observed conditions. The infiltrator made a run for it and signaled to orbit for immediate evac. Extraction would take time, and the humans and yowling animals were getting closer, closing in. Some of the humans were holding items identified as shotguns. If the infiltrator ever got out of this alive, it would study the rapid response that the human recently sleeping rural community mustered. It was rather impressive. Preliminary checks were made. Was it a military base, housing area? By some misfortune? Nope, just a rural neighborhood of regular people in a regular town. The infiltrator had broken into an enormous building marked IKEA as it fled the mob, and found its vast areas of blocked lines of sight perfect for remaining undetected long enough for the evac ship to get close enough to translocate it out of here. But it had to be close enough to do that. The infiltrator had just had to hide long enough. That was what it was literally born, modified, and trained to do. It began to feel a little hope that this mission wouldn't be a complete disaster. Then it heard it. The large dog haunched on the ground next to the human's leg, having led the human to the broken window. It was sniffing the air, making little urgent motions to run forward. But like an obedient pack predator, it stayed in place. "Where is it, boy? Where'd he go?" The dog bobbed its head and made an odd harrow, almost speaking noise, eagerly shivering with excitement as it leaned forward through the broken glass of the window, just waiting for permission. "Oh yeah, you got it, boy. Yeah, such a good boy." Everyone stood there for a moment, shifting their shotguns and flashlights in their hands, getting ready at the window and nearby storefronts. The silence hung for a dreadful moment. And the words that would come to bring terror to any infiltrator cadre of the galactic hegemony were heard for the first time. "Okay then, go get..." And the large dog was a blur of motion, barreling through the store aisles. It seemed to know precisely where the infiltrator was hiding, and the many humans were right behind it. The infiltrator had a last-minute footnote of data, as the translocator beam teleported it up to the evac ship. Apparently, the pet dogs of humanity actually understand human speech and the advanced cognitive meaning, as well as looking and pointing gestures, with all the context, to some very substantial degree. End of story. This is a special thank you to the one, the only, the legendary Arachino, who has become the only Tier 6 patron. I just want to thank the T5 patrons and channel members: Bob the Dragon, Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnholtz, Estrella the Dreamer, Tryagain95, Pudic Yol, Meridian117, Alithia, Jordan Bucksbaum, Angry Marine, Albarden Gusta, and Barkey. Thank you very much. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. There are links down below, both to support this channel and for the author of this fiction. Anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic one, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.